saying is that if, as Christians, somehow you believe the lie that faith and politics don't mix, that pastors should stay out of that, it's just too divisive, then by your apathy and your reluctance, you are actually helping to advance the doctrine and dogma of other world religions and of secular humanism to influence this nation rather than the values and virtues of Christianity. That's what's happening. Wake up. They're not asleep. They're not asleep. Why are Christians asleep today when it comes to this? Now, the fact is that only in recent times have pastors kowtowed to political correctness and remained silent or indifferent about faith and politics, but it wasn't always so. A brief little history lesson. Dating back to the time of the American colonies and in subsequent years, pastors boldly spoke out about the social issues of the day, and they called out the political candidates who were running for office. Every year, pastors would deliver what they would call election sermons, the kind of thing I'm doing today, only I do it every 4 years. They used to do it every year. For the first couple hundred years of American history, pastors would preach election sermons, and I only get to bring these books out every 4 years when I do an election sermon, but I have 2 volumes here of political sermons of the American founding era from 1730 to 1805. These are published sermons of what pastors used to do, how they used to get up in their pulpits and talk to people in their congregation about the social issues and call out the politicians. Why? The reason is because they wanted their folks to be biblically literate so that people could make an intelligent decision based on their sanctified conscience about the social issues and the political candidates and how they either did or did not align with the Bible, which is the source of all truth. The truth is that God has been at the center of our religious freedom, and faith and politics have been intertwined from the very beginning, from the founding of our nation in 1776, not 1619. Wake up. But 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was penned, listen to the various references to God in the Declaration of Independence. It starts with, quote, the laws of nature and nature's God in the first paragraph. It establishes that our, quote, unalienable rights come not from government, but from, quote, our Creator. That's paragraph 2. It appeals to, quote, the supreme judge of the world. That's the last paragraph. And then it invokes the protection of, quote, divine providence in the signature line of all 56 signers when they pledged to each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And then Congress actually instructed churches to read the Declaration of Independence from their steps so that everybody could hear across America. Churches were demanded by Congress to do such a thing. In fact, the Falls Church, the Episcopal Church, the old Falls Church in Falls Church, was one of those locations where in 1776 the Declaration of Independence was read from the steps of the church. That's how the news was dispersed in a day without social media. It was pastors who led the charge with the American Revolution to sever ties with Great Britain because of the oppression and tyranny of the government, in particular, oppression and tyranny of religious freedom. Pastors led that charge. Pastors like Jonas Clark, who formed the Minutemen militia in Lexington with 70 men from his congregation, who fought against and defeated 700 British, who marched against them in the first war, the Battle of Lexington of the Battle of Lexington of the Revolutionary War, April the 19th, 1775. Then when the British were defeated in Lexington, they moved on to Concord, where they were met by William Emerson, the pastor of the church there, the grandfather of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who summoned 300 of his men to fight against the British in Concord. Pastors like John Peter Muhlenberg from Woodstock, Virginia, not too far from here, down 81, who on January the 21st, 1776, preached a message to his congregation from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. The part about how there's a time for everything and a season for everything under the sun. When he got to verse 8 in Ecclesiastes 3, which talks about a time for peace and a time for war, John Peter Muhlenberg said to his people, this is no longer a time for peace. This is a time for war. and he removed his black clerical robe to reveal the officer's uniform in the Continental Army. And he walked to the back of his church, and he said to his men, "How many men are with me? We're going to fight." 300 of his men followed him out the door that day, and it formed the 8th Virginia Brigade in the Revolutionary War in the Continental Army. These are pastors leading the charge. Before James Madison became president, when he was running for the first Congress in 1789, he was running for the first Congress from Virginia, the 5th Congressional District. He met with some Baptists in Richmond. The Virginia Baptists held a convention. They sat down with James Madison and they said, "Listen, Madison, you will not get our votes unless you change your Federalist views and you write a Bill of Rights, especially to include in the First Amendment religious freedom." James Madison took their advice. He wrote the Bill of Rights, including Amendment number 1, religious freedom. And that same year, 1789, he was elected from Virginia to the first Congress of the United States. Don't mess with the Baptists. Friends, pastors and Christians have long been involved in government and politics.